Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Pardon the delay here. We have an executive meeting before this one, and we used up all of our time and gobbled some sandwiches down, and so we had a few technical things to wrap up here. So that put us behind a couple minutes. Before we get started here, we are making a video recording of our meeting here today. And I'm going to add another point. If you have trouble hearing, we're going through kind of an educational program here for people that can't hear. The signal is to put up your hand and wiggle your fingers. So that doesn't mean you want to speak, but it means you can't hear. So if we run into a situation where you can't hear, do this and we'll accommodate the best we can. The second thing we're going to do is implement something that I've always advocated, is that if a question is asked from somebody out on the floor here in the seated area, if a question's asked, before it's answered, I'd like everybody to make sure that we repeat the question so everybody knows what we're addressing. That can be a problem. We don't want to have anyone suffer with. Looking around, we have a quorum. So what takes us to the adoption of the meeting agenda. And I think there was one minor change in that I think it was the Long Range Planning Committee was listed here. They don't have anything to report today. We're working on the survey situation. So I need a motion to accept the minutes as amended. Mr. Giddings made a motion to accept the amended agenda and seconded by Herb Hess. All in favor? I guess that's everybody. Okay. Moving right along, takes us to the members' open forum. You come up and speak anything you've got on your mind. You've got 3 minutes with the green light, 30 seconds before we'd like you to stop. The yellow light will come on, the red one at the end. And when you come up to speak, if you have anything to say, please give us your name and your address. So we'll open up the public forum if anyone's got anything. Okay, moving right along. Wait, Ken?
Should I bring this up now or wait for today? No,
you're on the agenda.
Okay.
Was there something else?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Announcements. Let's see what's going on here. A few things. First of all, I want to turn it over to Director Giddings to give us an update on a project he's working on. Then I'll come back and fill in a few more spots.
Thank you, John. I asked John if we could take a few minutes of your time. The Burger Improvement Committee, which you regular attendees here know that it started or was formed a few months ago. And we've had our second meeting yesterday. And between our first meeting and our second meeting, we sent out a survey to approximately 35 user groups of Burger Center. And we have gotten most of that information from the user groups of Burger Center. And we got together yesterday at a meeting, and the prime objective of that meeting was to take that information and make it, organize it, and make it useful. I'm going to read you some things from yesterday's meeting. The meeting began with reports from committee members of the responses of user groups of Burger Center to the committee survey. User groups' needs and wants were categorized by the constituent elements of Burger Center, for instance, the dance floor, the kitchen, the fireside room, etc. Also, Burger Center's infrastructure, like the HVAC, the electrical, the audiovisual, etc. Thirdly, the general and miscellaneous comments and suggestions. For instance, requests for storage or suggestions there should be increased storage both on a permanent and temporary basis. To date, we've had contact with 27 user groups, including the OVA office representative, and have been contacted and given input to the committee. There remains a handful of other user groups that need to respond to the survey. We also have as-built drawings as of the last remodel of the burger, like when the restrooms were remodeled and other things done, as well as a schedule of use of the Burger Center from the OVA office. So far then, as you can see, we've taken in raw data and just tried to organize it. At the next committee meeting, which will be in about two weeks, we'll concentrate on analysis of that data. We have organized and categorized and pared down to primary Burger Center remodeling needs and secondary needs. By primary, I mean, and the committee means that if we're going to do anything to the Burger Center, we're going to have to do some electrical work, we're going to have to do some HVAC. If we don't do that, we shouldn't do anything. And secondary would be other things that may be necessary, but they're not as primary as, say, the electrical and the HVAC. At the next meeting, we'll begin the search for a multi-use building architect or designer to assist the committee. At this time, I'd like to, John, ask that at our next board meeting next month, that we have on the agenda the request from the Burger Improvement Committee for a budget. We're going to be looking for that architect, that designer, over the next 30 days. And within the next 60 days, we may need some money to hire somebody to help us to go forward after we analyze data. Also, by the time we get to our next meeting, we're going to read and incorporate ideas and suggestions from the general public, meaning you and others. A notification of an email address for the committee will be advertised in the Oakmont News and Oakmont E-Blast, and any resident with any suggestions is encouraged to contact the committee through that route. We'll also be having public meetings at board meetings also. It's public announcement at board meetings. If there are any questions from the board, or if co-chairs Andy or Scott would like to make a comment. Any questions from the audience? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Your taskmaster, would you make sure that we have that listed for our next meeting? That's taken care of. Excellent. Other things of interest, West project is coming right along and on budget. It's looking great. We're due for an extended dry spell, which is going to really help us get this stucco work done. We were concerned about too much moisture, but everything's working out there. You know, we'd rather have the rain. Right now, dry is good. At the same time, the electrical project for the switchgear is progressing. And when you leave here, if you look across, you'll see people actually working on it. PG&E is on schedule to put a new transformer in, and we're doing the upgrades to the equipment room in the central swimming area for safety purposes, which was part of that project, and it's on schedule also. I think that pretty much covers it. Things are in good shape and moving right along. At this point, we'll turn over to Frank Batchelor to report on the executive meeting minutes summary from 2 weeks ago. Sorry, last month.
In that executive board meeting, we basically dealt with assessment dispute, some violations of protective restrictions, and discussed negotiations involving the lease of the OVA administration office. Apologize, I have to be general about these comments, but they are mostly confidential.
Thank you. There were no actions taken outside of the board meeting, which brings us to the consent calendar. Need a motion to accept the consent calendar as published. Got moved by Herman. I'm sorry. I defer. Seconded by Alan Scott. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, discussion. Fran, please.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask a question. According to our last meeting, we were going to again discuss the caregivers' residence, or how we would look at that on this date, and I presumed it had been put off, but nothing was said about it.
I don't have the answer to that. Cassie, you have something to add?
The caregivers' residence, how it would be looked at, and it was on the agenda, the consent calendar last meeting, and we put it over to this meeting, but I see it's not on here. So
wasn't it just about the caretaker, just the additional lines on the policy, and that? Oh, right.
Yep, looking at the minutes, under future board meeting agenda recommendations, it says caregiver policy ratification.
No.
I just didn't want to get it, didn't want to lose it, so I thought.
Sure.
Okay, we'll make sure that's covered by next month. Thank you for bringing that up. I missed it. Any further discussion? No, all in favor of the motion to accept the consent calendar? Opposed? You're opposed? You're late, yes. Okay. That's passed unanimously, thank you. Mr. Chanel, you've got it.
For the month of December, the revenue was $171,000 with expenses of $180,000, so we had a deficit of about $9,500 for the month. For the full year, we had revenue of $2,061,000, which was 0.5% worse than budget. Expenses of $2,004,000, which was 3% better than budget, leaving us a surplus of $57,000. And of course, that's unaudited at this point. The transfers to the funds were all equal to or better than budget. The cash in the various funds: operating fund, $480,000, asset replacement, $957,000, capital improvement, $1,035,000, catastrophe, $111,000, leaving us a total cash of $2,583,000. Any questions? Okay, also on a quarterly basis, it's a requirement to report to the board and residents the status of the asset replacement reserve. At least for the 2014, the monthly transfer was increased to $42,667,000. We've transferred that exact amount each month. It's also a requirement to review the bank reconciliations quarterly, which I've reviewed and balanced back to the balance sheet. Also quarterly, I'm to report our cash position for all funds in total. All funds are fully FDIC insured. We had CDs and savings accounts with interest rates ranging between 9 and 83 basis points, and several non-interest-bearing checking accounts. In January, there are 3 CDs that are maturing. 2 of the CDs will be renewed for 3 months, and 1 CIF CD will be cashed out for $600,000. Any questions? Board accept the report.
You have a motion to accept the report made by Alan Scott, seconded by Fran Diaz. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the report? Motion carried unanimously. Which takes us to item 8, manager's report.
Probably the most exciting thing I have to report today is that the OVA office now has new office hours. we're opening up the office between the hours of 9 and 5. So we've extended it 2 hours during the day. And if you start calling in at 8:30, we're there. So we will answer your calls starting from 8:30 onward. The other thing that I think is important to discuss one last time is there anyone in this audience that does not know anything about the long-range planning research survey? Raise your hand if you don't know anything about it. Because we're all hoping that you're going to participate in the email questionnaires. If you don't have, or you don't think that we have your email address, now is the time to get it in, because the survey is going to go live February 1st. I believe you'll have until February 21st to get your response in. So it's really important that we get everyone, as wide of a range of people in Oakmont as possible to respond to this. There, for the people who are not computer savvy or don't have computers, these people are going to be able to come into the computer center, and we'll have people that will assist them in taking out or taking the survey. And also we're going to have some nursing students from Sonoma State University actually go to homes. So for people who are homebound and they communicate to us that they'd like to take the survey, we have these students able to go into their homes. So there's really, we're really trying to give everybody every opportunity to communicate their wants and needs. And this survey is going to be very helpful to the Long-Range Planning Committee as well as the board to determine Oakmont's future. So it's in all of our interest to support it and take the survey.
Thank you. Any questions about that? It's coming along wonderfully, and they put together a real first-class survey. That takes us to item 9, moving right along here. Sue Millar, the OCDC status update, please.
Thank you. Susan Millar, 373 Greenfield Circle. I'm the chair of the OCDC. Our last meeting was spent assigning each member to follow a project that is on our radar screen. We have the Ledson Winery project down the street, the Annadel Winery across the street. We're also following what will develop with a pedestrian bicycle path with the county. We are following the disposition of the water treatment plant, but we don't have any input into that, and I can't report on that right now. I mentioned the last meeting that we're very concerned with the sign proliferation along Highway 12 and the traffic congestion that will be incurred by more wineries opening for tastings and events. The bridge to Annadel is still on our radar. There has been some litigation, hearing, I believe, between, excuse me, I always get so hoarse and shy, I guess, when I get up here. There is some litigation that has been carried on, but no final adjudication between Wild Oak and the city of Santa Rosa, and we cannot proceed and will not pester you with the bridge to Annadel until there is some kind of adjudication there. The most important thing that has occurred that is very important for the board to understand and the residents of Oakmont is that the Oakmont Senior Living Group is having a problem getting their plans through the design review of the city because of this ridge line question. In fact, several people from Oakmont have sent letters against changing the ridge line designation. It's very important for everyone to understand how much time, how much money Oakmont has spent in dealing with the Ilnoka project. And if you knew, I don't have the plans with me and I haven't looked at them for a long time, but the very first plans submitted were They consisted of a 3-story apartment building that you would be looking at. 6-story, thank you, I brought my encyclopedia with me. Also, no age restriction. We have worked, spent money, hired land use experts, written letters, taken busloads of residents down to the city hall. And now, if this plan is not approved, if the city of Santa Rosa will not change the general plan regarding the ridge line, we are back to square one, which means the 6-story apartment building and the non-restricted residents will be back on the board, and we'll have to negotiate all over again. This has been going on for the 9 years I've been here and well before that. Wally, do you want to add something? Since Wally has been with the project for all this time, I may have missed a couple of important points, but it is, we're going to be negotiating this all over again if we can't get this resolved. You want me to help you?
As most of you are aware, the board last year sent a letter to the city with an agreement with Oakmont Senior Living, which is Gallagher's company that is developing El Noka. And Oakmont agreed to go through the planning process with the city of Santa Rosa with them instead of against them, which we have been for the last 8 or 9 years. And unfortunately, we have some newer residents who do not know what has gone on for so many years. And the city has received a number of letters from residents here protesting any construction on the upper portion of the El Noka property. Our latest and final agreement with Oakmont Senior Living, in fact, all of the 3 agreements, each one being updated as the project was changed, they all say that if the city does not go along with the current plan, then all things are off and the front 8 acres, 9 acres will not be rezoned age restricted. That zoning change is automatic if the city approves their project. If we have Oakmont residents sending letters and the city has no idea whether this is a mainstream and the bulk of Oakmont is now turned the other way. So it's a problem that we have to look at. And we will probably be asking the board in the next week or two to approve some incursions into the city government to try to solve this problem before it gets out of hand. The last thing we need is to start all over again and see those 2 original 6-story apartment buildings appear down there, which would be an absolute traffic nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you, Wally. I have a special feeling about this because that 6-story building would be a few hundred feet from my kitchen window. So I'll be the first one to agree with you. I don't understand where people are coming from. This is not it's a misdefined ridge line. A ridge line is like, if you look up on top of Mountain Grove and you see houses on the ridge line, there is no ridge line. I mean, if you look in the background of it, it's trees. I don't think you'd even see these things. So I really request that you send a note to the city, and I think it would be a very good idea if the board put something together to recommend this. And if anyone else has a better idea or an additional thing, I'd love to go along with it.
I would ask that this somehow get into the e-blast soon because I think it's a misunderstanding. Residents hear things, you know, like I said to Wally this morning, I feel like it's Groundhog Day almost every week here in Oakmont. And, you know, people just don't know what the background is, and they need to know, and they need to know what the original plan was. Those homes up on that hilltop are going to look wonderful if they see the original plan. And the age restriction was one of the things that we were very, very strong about advocating. And that is not in place until they get their plan approved, and they will get the age restriction in there. That property is just open right now. So e-blast, I don't know if I have time to do that. And possibly a flyer for a lot of the people who live down there on the west end who may not realize what might be coming. Okay, thanks, John.
So were you at the meeting, Wally? Were you at the meeting when this came up? How did you find out about it?
Well, Wally's been in contact with Steve McCullough.
I have two questions. How many residents' letters did they get from Oakmont?
I am only aware of 6, but in talking to Oakmont Senior Living, they said there are more. And I'm trying to get a handle on who has sent letters to them. Those of you who read the article that was in the Press Democrat in early December, written by Kevin McCallum, who covers City Hall, mentioned specifically an Oakmont resident who had sent a letter to the city protesting any construction going on the high ground at Anoka. And of course his name is in the article. So I looked the gentleman up. We spent an hour together at the Quail Inn a few weeks ago. I explained to him what had gone on here for the last 9 or 10 years, and he immediately sent a retraction to the City Council, City Planning Department, and the Planning Commission that he had unfortunately sent his original letter without knowing the background of the problems there. So this is what we need to do to contact residents who have sent them out. You know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but they need to know the facts before they send something out that they may not agree with after they learn the facts.
Should we be going to the hearing?
Pardon?
Should some of us be going to the hearing?
Well, we don't know when that's going to be. It has to go to the City Council. And my guess is it'll probably be at their March meeting, but we don't know that yet.
Can we go to
We can go to any of the meetings once we're notified that Anoka's on an agenda. That's not a problem. As Sue said a few years ago, we took 2 busloads of Oakmont residents to a city council meeting, and that did a lot of good. Let's say the vote went our way that afternoon. But we will know in plenty of time to do something.
What do you think would happen if they got a huge multi-page petition from the folks here that said, we're in favor of this?
That would be good, but we'd have to do it doggone fast.
Thank you.
We've seen time to time.
your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Pat Olive. I live at 7305 Oakmont Drive. We've heard a lot over this, and we know that this has been going on for years and years and years. And I think a lot of people probably that have moved here, they don't know the true history. And can't we have an article in the Oakmont News outlining everything basically what's happened and why it's to our advantage that it happens the way that we've backed, so that everyone understands. You know, it may be a long article, maybe it could be shortened somewhat and just give some of the results, but at least so everyone has a clear picture of what is at stake, what's gone on before, and what is at stake now, and why it's in the best interest of Oakmont that it come out a certain way. Would that help as far as people supporting it, not opposing it? I mean, the Oakmont News is it's a town paper, so to speak. It's not, you know, really a daily newspaper that gives the news. It's the voice, the mouthpiece of the community. Just an idea.
Thank you. I think the message is clear here. We'll put our heads together and see what we can do from our end. Any other comment on that? Then we'll move along. The next item was from the LRP, and that was taken off. Next item is the Natural Resource Committee Charter and Recognition Request from Mr. Ken Hyman. Is it Hyman or Heyman?
It's Heyman.
Heyman, my apologies.
Hello everyone, I'm Ken Heyman. I live at 6443 Stonebridge. I've prepared some thoughts here just to be sure I say everything, and I'd just like to read this for you. Just over a year ago, my wife and I moved to Oakmont. In December, I had the opportunity to participate in the Oakmont resident focus group. And within my focus group, one common reason why people chose to live in Oakmont was because of the natural beauty and the surroundings of Oakmont. It was interesting because our focus group's facilitator brought up the point that this was the one common denominator between all the different demographic ages of these focus groups. That it was the natural surroundings and the beauty of Oakmont people were attracted to. These heritage oak forests and surrounding habitats not only add values to our properties, they provide beautiful views, opportunities for recreation, improve our physical and mental well-being, and they just generally enhance the quality of all of our lives. As residents, we have the responsibility. We have a responsibility to these natural resources. All Oakmont residents benefit from these resources, particularly the heritage oak forests. This is our legacy as residents, and after all, this community was named Oakmont. The stewardship of the natural resources of Oakmont is a responsibility beyond the practice of maintenance. It requires management, close attention, careful consideration. It's not practical or reasonable to expect our maintenance crew to be tasked with the preservation of these natural resources, along with the extensive responsibilities of keeping Oakmont's infrastructure functioning properly. Recently, a heritage oak tree behind our house was cut down without proper procedures. The decision to remove a heritage oak tree is not always clear. I've experienced this firsthand now. Unfortunately, you can't replace a 300-year-old oak tree. You can only mitigate this loss. You can manage and protect the existing forests and learn from the process. With this in mind, I proposed to the OVA Board of Directors to recognize a Natural Resources Committee to participate in the preservation, protection, and management, when necessary, the rehabilitation of this collective resource that we all possess. And that's really the crux of it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Heyman. The board's all gotten a copy of the charter and what you wish to do. So I'll start with the board. And do you have any comments, pro, con, points of discussion? Mr. Giddings. Oh.
Mr. Heyman, first of all, for a resident who's been here just a year, it's encouraging to see you getting up at the microphone and suggesting a change.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't know all the details. I've heard some details about the tree that was taken down. And I regret, as a member of the board, that you feel proper procedures weren't taken, and I'm not so sure that they were also. What you're suggesting, and I've read thoroughly because it's very interesting. I mean, not often do you get a request from a resident for a standing committee, sometimes an ad hoc committee, but a standing. And I walked myself through this. The ground I'm at right now, Mr. Hammond, is that we have a organizational structure now that should be handling what you're proposing, i.e. a landscape improvement committee, an OVA staff, and the board. And in general, I'm not getting specific, I would rather see that current infrastructure and organization get better rather than having a special ops, so to speak, committee, be it ad hoc, appointed or standing, to specialize in one thing that this organization should be good at. Because you're right, we all enjoy the views, we all enjoy the peace of mind. And I would hate to think what would happen to my peace of mind if we lost the Oaks. If my peace of mind is this bad right now. But I cannot bring myself to get to the position to say that I would support a special standing committee for this purpose. I want the organization to get better.
Alan?
It's my understanding that the Landscape Improvement Committee has no objection to this new committee, and I've been involved with the Landscape Improvement Committee for over a decade, and I keep thinking I don't want to see a conflict between the flower people and the tree hunters. That's the way I'm thinking about it.
Of course.
And cross jurisdictions. Have you? That's all I want to say. I just want to say that the Landscape Improvement Committee is very, very keenly interested in the same thing you are.
I'll save my comments for later. Any others from the?
Herm Herman, 332 Oak Leaf Circle. I haven't seen this proposed charter, and you're talking about the Landscape Improvement Committee, which deals strictly with Oakmont Village Association of Property. Is this charter considered for all of Oakmont, including residential properties? Well, I won't have a chance to read it right now, but this. Then again, you're in conflict with the Architecture Committee, because this is one of our functions, to deal with these landscape problems within Oakmont, non-Oakmont property. So I'm just wondering, is that a conflict?
They're not dealing with people's homes, they're just dealing with the open space areas.
Strictly open space.
Strictly open space.
You know, a couple things I'd like to address is that landscape, intentional landscapes, plantings, annuals, even trees that are intentionally planted are very different from wild spaces. The spaces where these foxes that we see run across the road and the woodpeckers that are, you know, taking care of the full life cycle of the trees that are surrounding us. It's a very different practice. And In the charter, which I know a lot of the people out here haven't seen, it states very clearly to work collectively with both the Architectural Committee and the Landscape Committee. Fortunately, one of the members that I've proposed be part of the committee has 30 years experience as a forester. She actually was a forester for 30 years, and as well as a consulting arborist, which is very different from an arborist who works for a tree company. A consulting arborist has no stake in a tree being removed or being rehabilitated. They just pay attention to the facts of the matters and advise accordingly. And I agree. You know, I don't think I would, Mr. Giddings, I don't believe I would be here if the committees were paying attention to what had happened with this easy 300-year-old oak tree that was removed without a permit, without any announcement, without any process that I've already spoken with the city about that should have taken place. I had no opportunity to bring in an arborist, a consulting arborist, to advise, for any advice whatsoever. The tree was just simply removed. So, and as I mentioned previously, I said, the only thing that you can do in a situation like this is learn from it. And this is part of the learning process, which is my best shot at it here is to propose this committee and be sure that its members have the qualifications to participate in a committee of this nature. So that's really about all I have to say.
Could I ask a question? Would you have any objection if we enlarge the scope of the landscape committee's function? For instance, right now, basically to review, or our mission is to oversee the landscaping of all OVA facilities and other common areas and make recommendations for any improvement we deem necessary or desirable. Can we incorporate the functions that you're referring to as an additional duty of the landscaping committee? Would that be satisfactory?
I suppose so, yes. If we could, you know, being that depends on exactly what that means.
Well, we would take, we would probably take your charter and we would perhaps include that along with the charter of the landscaping committee,
right,
and incorporate them together so that this committee as a whole is in charge of that. I mean, I think landscaping, to me, that also tells me, or it suggests to me that we're really thinking about planning things and that sort of thing. But I don't see why we can't either rename the committee and just incorporate what you're suggesting, rather than having a whole new committee.
Ken, I want to thank you for following up on this. I wouldn't turn down the help, guys. I think it would be excellent if he were incorporated in the landscape or as a subcommittee of the landscape and took the expertise that you've dug up around here and take advantage of it. Because we don't really have anyone looking specifically with a critical eye to the wild part of Oakmont. So anyway, thank you for the work you've done, and thank you.
Here comes Eleanor, but before she gets here, I wanted to say, you know, perhaps what should be done or could be done around definitions or charters, we could put in abeyance and just ask those concerned to put an application into the landscape committee to be a member, and let the landscape improvement committee discuss these things and not force one side or the other. If there are indeed sides, there might be a lot of common elements, but it just goes back to this thing, I want to get our organization better, rather than putting on another appendage that might make the whole organization a little more viscous, you know, and slow things down. So pardon me, Eleanor, for stepping in there, but you know, I would think something, sorry for the word organic, coming up from the landscape committee might be more suitable and appropriate than something from the board.
Lenore Brodnansky, I'm the chair of the landscape committee. I live on Oakmont Drive. My thought is we don't currently have anyone on our committee who is qualified as this gentleman. And I would certainly welcome a member of our committee who could address such a thing, but I don't feel qualified to judge trees and so on. We'd have to hire people to do that. So if there are qualified members of our community who would like to join our committee and take on that particular subject, I would welcome them. Thank you. You want to go ahead, Wally?
Ladies first.
I'm afraid I'm going to come from a totally different position. I look at the oaks, and especially the oaks in Oakmont, as belonging to all of us, not just to the person on whose property one oak may be standing. And I think you've read in the paper or seen on television just this week about the saving of an oak at the park here in Sonoma County, with which they said that the oak was dead, it needed to come down, and yet when professionals came in and looked at it, they have done some carving and some taking care of that oak so that it's going to continue to exist for a number of years, and we hope. But I think that's what should happen here. And as I say, I think those oaks belong to all of us, although I think I rake up the leaves of most of them myself, so it's close to my heart. I think this belongs actually to a staff person who, when a complaint has come in with regard to any kind of a tree that is endangering a house or property of an individual, and the staff should then call in a professional. It's an expense I really don't want to accept, but I think we must do it because these oaks do belong to all of us. They should be looked at by a professional, and if the professional says it's perfectly all right to continue to prune and keep these trees, then we should keep them. So I would like to see this, Mr. Chairman, return to the board to discuss at a further length and come in with a recommendation.
Go ahead, Alan.
Also as somebody who lives under a heritage oak tree and has to blow my deck off every day, I feel a stewardship for that oak tree as well as the one in my cul-de-sac, which is almost a 300-year-old tree. And I am very, very appalled that this tree was cut down without an independent evaluation of it. And I certainly think this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and I appreciate Ken bringing this to the floor here. Maybe we should talk about it in a workshop, but I think that needs to be addressed. It should never, ever happen again.
Go ahead, Wally. I'll yield to you, and I'll pick up the end.
I have a question. Was this tree on OVA property?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And we had a professional company that we use on a regular basis come in, and they did have an arborist. The question about independence is.
But did you get permission from the city? And
there was confusion there. Let me explain what was done after that. At the time, we, Oakmont, were under the impression that the contractor was taking care of the permit, and the contractor thought we were doing it. So it didn't get done. Following what happened, I sat down with Mr. Heyman. Not literally, we stood up at the site and discussed it, and a number of things happened at that point. One of them, I made an executive decision that nothing else was going to get cut down until we put something in place as far as a policy and a procedure to make sure that what we were doing was correct. And we followed through on that. Second thing was that nothing will be done until the permit is clearly taken care of, and that fell on OVA to do, not the contractor. And so those bases were covered. So we put that in place and decided that we were going to look ahead and see what we could do. I think at this point, Director Diaz pointed out she maybe want to put this decision off to look at it further. My feeling is, and has been ever started looking at this, because I've been involved since day one, is that looking over the charter as it's written, there's a lot of conflict with what's already being done by the Landscape Improvement Committee. They have, it's already in place, it's been working for quite some time. I think it's at this point it's an educational process, and I would recommend that we not go ahead with a separate standing committee, but take the offer of Mr. Heyman, this person that they have working with them who was a professional, and ask them to apply to the Landscape Committee to augment what they're already doing and improve what they're already doing, and not reinvent the wheel with another standing committee. I think that's the way to proceed at this point. I think we've learned our lessons. We know what needs to be done. It's just a matter of implementing it and moving forward.
Well, you've answered my question. I was a little concerned because 15 years or so ago, when I was chair of the architectural committee, problem came up on private property. And it was merely the pruning of a heritage oak tree. The city was out here in, I think it took them 8 minutes from the time the phone call was made until someone was at the property with a cease and desist order. And they fined the arborist company a considerable amount of money for touching a heritage tree without the proper paperwork. They didn't care who got it, but no arborist is supposed to touch a tree unless they see that it's been approved by the city and county. So I just wanted to make sure the OVA staff knows that.
Mr. Heyman, do you know if the woman you're working with would be willing to serve on the committee?
I'd be happy to discuss it with her. That's certainly one solution.
Because I think at this point it's contingent upon her or somebody else with equal or better qualification to take care of that, solves the problem, allows us to move ahead immediately.
I'll discuss that with her and get back.
So shall we table this until we get an answer back from Mr. Heyman and a chance for the board to think about this?
I would request that it be brought up in a work session, the next work session. Yes. Workshop. Whatever.
At the next workshop. That would be, what, just a few weeks away? Would that work for you?
Sure. There's one more thing I'd like to add. Is that I've, through the process of where I lived previously and dealing with trees there, I've learned that for every arborist who says a tree can be removed or should be removed, there's an arborist who says it doesn't have to be. And it's very important to have an arborist who has no stake in the game, who is a consulting arborist, and who particularly has experience with this kind of environment that we're in, this oak forest. I had an arborist look at the tree that was removed. It was about 10 to 15% rot in the trunk, and it had many, many years to stand, according to that arborist. So my intention is not to contradict anybody, but my intention is to bring up the point that we need proper stewardship. We need the right qualified people advising us on how to take care of these trees. And however that comes about it has to happen. And that's pretty much it. And I'll do everything to influence Linda Romero to become a part of the landscape committee, whatever it takes.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. It's kind of unfortunate the way it started, but I think we're all going to end off better off as we look ahead. I'll give you a classic example. How many of you have been up to Jack London State Historic Park? The big oak tree outside the cottage there. This is a classic example. It's been dying for a long time, dying. The state Parks Department said it's got to come down, and there's a huge outrage from those of us that worked. I've been volunteering up there for more than 10 years. I said, well, wait a minute, let's get some other opinions. And they went out and they found some folks who were in academia at the University of California and says, well, if you do this and do that, it doesn't have to come down right away. And after a lot of negotiation, they decided it's going to stand for a while longer. So there's another classic case of the importance of advocacy and compromise. So I suspected that was the case.
John?
Go ahead, please.
I have a question about why you're going to table the issue. It seems that it's resolving itself, so why would you want to put this on a board workshop? I just need some clarification.
Personally, I don't see that it needs to go. I think we have all the input we need. We know where we want to go. It's just a matter of who's going to serve on the committee to fill that spot with that particular expertise. Would you object to that, Alan?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking of, that we need a written policy on how to treat oak trees, heritage oak trees, that clearly defines the necessity of having an independent arborist examine a tree before a tree cutter comes in, even if they have on staff an arborist. And that's what I'm looking at, that maybe thing. No, I have no problems with putting it all and taking it out of a work session and having everybody discuss it in private and then seeing if it can come through the architectural, the landscape improvement committee, or if we need to re-investigate this application.
Well, I think any change in policy or procedure would come after this additional resource comes into the committee, and the committee would come up and write it up, and it would come from there. It would spring from that point. It would make the most sense to me. I'd like to get this settled today, personally, but it's not my decision to make.
Once again, Cassie Turner has more courage than I do. She brought up that question that I wasn't going to, because I don't see the need at the board level to deal with this issue anymore. What I heard was that somebody of interest in this subject is going to apply to the Landscape Improvement Committee, and the board does not need to pass a heritage oaks policy or procedure. The Landscape Improvement Committee is going to make recommendations and put that within their charter and their procedures. And I hope, my wish is that, like I said before, we all get better at this. And certainly on the board here, we've heard from people who are just as interested in these oaks as Mr. Heyman. And while I'm at this juncture, I want to compliment you. I mean, you brought up an important subject to a lot of us, and you did it in a very work-like manner. You went the full route to suggest how it could be done. And now you're being kind enough to allow us to suggest that we have an organization that can handle this, and you're willing to support that as long as things improve. And improve they must. And so I thank you for that.
John, I'll make a comment. Heard a lot of comment here, but I haven't heard anything in regard to the requirements that we must adhere to by the Fish and Wildlife people. If you are going to remove a tree in which the removal of the said tree would result in silt being washed into a drainage area that eventually would go into a stream bed where there would be places for fish population to take place. You cannot remove those trees or disturb the soil around them unless you get permission from Fish and Wildlife. PG&E tried to go around Fish and Wildlife last year over here in the area going up toward Starry Knoll, and they were stopped flat in their tracks because they were going to remove a tree that was in a stream bed. And I'm telling you, the fines that Fish and Wildlife will administer are really severe. So there has to be some other considerations besides just an arbor view.
I think this juncture, we've discussed this extensively, and we thank you, Mr. Heyman, for bringing this up. I don't see if the board has to take any action at this point. It's dependent upon Mr. Heyman getting with their resource and with the committee and working that out and coming back to us and saying, okay, just the board blesses a new member, and that's about it. So unless I'm missing a point of order, I think we can move on. Great. The important thing is we're working on the problem and getting it solved, and we're all moving in the right direction. I didn't hear one word today against what we're trying to accomplish here, and that's commendable. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 10B, has to do with a West Pool Spa Deck and Cabana. Yes, would you like to say something about that?
Mark Rogers is here. Mark will speak to it.
Mark, you've got the floor.
Thank you. Mark Rogers, Facility Maintenance Manager. As you all know, the West Rec We're also undergoing an AV upgrade in a burger center later this year, just so you know. As you know, West Rec Center is going under major renovation. As an extension of that, Cassie and I and the contractors involved looked at doing the pool remodel, concrete deck replacement, and a cabana roof. We did put it out to bid, received 3 bids, put it through Finance Committee last month for approval. They approved the contractors, the bids that we put forward, and we'd like to go ahead and ask for your approval at this board. We'll do a full pool renovation, approximately 7,000 square feet of concrete replacement, and replace the roof on the cabana, removing the solar water system that's on there, and repair any rot, new gutters, downspout for that building.
Do you want to talk about the salinity?
I could probably give that to Cassie.
As the saltwater pool. He's talking about the saltwater pool.
Yes. One of the suggestions that Cassie and I talked about over the past year was to turn the West Rec pool into saltwater. It is, our aerobics classes meet over there 4 days a week, and it's a good option. It's healthier, better for people to swim in. And so that would be one of the options that we would look at, is converting this pool to salt water when we bring it, the whole facility back online on or about the first week of March.
Any questions at this point?
Oh, what? It would be the board. With a strong recommendation from Mark and I. As in Verona has it, as in Spring Lake Village has it, as in, let's see, what's the other one? Trilogy has it, as in, they're all going towards saltwater pools.
What's the purpose?
The purpose of it is when you're swimming in salt water, you feel like you're swimming in just water. And when you come out of it, you don't feel that chlorine, you don't have all the chemicals on your body. It's a very natural system. And so it's that's why people prefer to swim in it. It doesn't wreck your hair. You don't have to necessarily clean out your swimming suit because it doesn't have the chemicals in it.
Well, this came up before. It's my understanding of this type of system is convertible either way. I mean, the equipment you put in can go either way. Is that correct?
That is correct.
There are some minor differences in the material is used in the pool plastering and such. The saltwater system requires a higher quality of materials, which in turn lasts longer. So even if we would intend to use those higher quality materials anyway, because there's more bang for the buck, so to speak. So it's just a matter of having the advantage of salt there. We'd be much better off in the long run. Just think it's a lot shorter than driving down to the coast and freezing yourself.
I just had a question, Chuck. When in your financial report you said you were going to cash out a CIF CD for $600,000, and there's recommendations for this from the Finance Committee too. That is the pool and the resurfacing.
Actually, the pool will be paid out of AR. The CD we're cashing in for the capital improvement is for the West Ref remodel.
Okay, so that $600,000 anticipates West Rec building only?
Yeah.
It doesn't anticipate anything regarding the pool deck?
No, the pool deck, there's sufficient funds from the ARF to pay for it.
Okay, good, thank you.
I just want a clarification. When we say the Finance Committee approved, what you're saying is that there's money in the account that could cover.
Yes, we approved recommending the board to make the decision.
Okay, so you approve. Okay, you're recommending
We had said
spending
okay,
money.
but pass the buck.
Okay. My question, Mark, how much is this going to cost?
Finance Committee approved up to $185,000. That included for the pool, for the concrete, for the cabana, plus a contingency for permitting fees.
This would be the final touch on this whole project. Right now, we're essentially redoing the whole building for another 40 to 50 years life. And what's there, what we have now is deteriorating. It would be good to put the whole package together and get it done. So we have essentially starting fresh.
The other component of this that you didn't mention is also all of the concrete going around to the tennis court side where the cabana is. That's being lifted up, and the separators that are wood are rotting. So that whole area is going to be replaced as well in this 185.
Correct. The one other thing that, in anticipation of going to saltwater pool, we put out for bid and have accepted a marine additive into the concrete to allow it to repel the saltwater effects, the deterioration effects of salt water. So it did raise the price a little bit, but it does cover all of the concrete around the pool, spa, and on the other side by the tennis court. So as John was referring to, when we open that center back up, basically it would be brand new.
I have a question, Cassie.
How much is a little bit? A little bit.
About $10 a square.
Repeat the question, please.
How much is the marine additive? $10 a cubic yard. Cubic yard is 27 square feet of concrete.
Have we decided on which contractor to go with? Or what's the situation on that? Do we have multiple bids for this project?
Yeah, we went through a 3-bid process for contractors and for pool remodelers. I had site visits with them, did a spec sheet. Even the current contractor that's doing the building, Nordby Construction, was invited to bid. They decided not to, but went for other concrete and contractors. The contractor that we recommend is Corey Hardy, who did the Plaza project out here. He's currently working on the electrical transformer renovation. And we have a great comfort level and professional experience on his side working for us.
What about the pool?
Pool, we also had 3 contractors. The lowest cost is actually somewhat local. Aztec Pool out of Napa was low bid. And I had a site meeting with the owner yesterday here on site, and all the time frame and everything that we're looking at, they're comfortable with, and the cost and things that we want to do to improve the pool itself.
So we have 3 separate bids on the pool, and we've had those submitted to the board.
It's on page 40.
I beg your pardon?
The diagram is on page 40, breakdown.
I think it's broken down. I was looking at the
It's on 39.
yeah, I was looking at the different bids myself, and wondering why we didn't discuss these in a executive session, so we could evaluate the different bids. It seems to me that was it Burnett's?
Burkett.
Berkland's?
Burkett.
Seemed like a more professional bid to me.
One of the drawbacks to their proposal is Burkett's is a pool company. It deals strictly in pools. And one of the things that they couldn't do is that sidewalk cement work around to the back of the tennis court. So that wasn't in their proposal.
I may have dropped the ball here, but somehow I never got copies of all these documents, or I didn't download one of the 2, the bids and the recommendations and all of that. So I wasn't really prepared for this right now. I don't know what your urgency is, but I've mentioned a few times that I'd like to go out and actually look at the situation and what we're recommending out there, to get a view myself, to see and have explained to me what needs to be done. This is a fairly big hunk of money, $170,000, $180,000. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, okay? I just need more information.
I think at this time, perhaps the best thing to do is to wait for our next executive session. It is a contractual nature. It certainly falls within our purview to do it that way. I just want to make just a general comment with regarding contractors. There are contractors and there are contractors. And especially on larger projects like this, you look at the costs and other things. The other thing you look at is the reliability of the contractor, the quality of the work they've done, the work experience that you've had with them over a number of many projects. I think it's a general feeling that if you find a good one and he's reasonably in cost and he's easy to deal with and he does excellent work and is cooperative in every way, hang on to him. That doesn't mean you ignore the other costs, but I think that sometimes we're not a state agency where we have to go with the lowest bidder. You know, look at the Bay Bridge, okay? That was a bad example. But I think it's important to look at the really big picture when you're dealing with contractual situations like this, and make sure that you've really covered all the bases. Would there be any objection to putting this off to our next executive session? That'll give you a chance, Frank, to do an eyeball inspection, and anybody else that have questions to get filled in and deal with it at that time. I don't think there's a pressing need that we do this today, but we do need to do it very soon.
I'd like to accompany Frank when he goes out to take his eyeball look-see at things.
I'm available at any time to go look at any of these projects. When a new board, before you got on, we did a facility walkthrough at any time to do that. The longest lead item in this project would be the permit. I applied for that last Thursday to the city. That it gets assigned to a designer today for rapid approval for the pool deck renovation. So the time frame that we will look at is we'd like to bring the building back online when the renovation is complete, with the pool and the deck at the same time. That would be on or about the first week of March. So that would be the, as long as we can get that approval within the next executive work session, our time frame or schedule would work just fine.
It's just important to point out that we want to get this done, if possible, before the start of the real swimming season. And also, we're going to be taking the central pool offline because the plaster is flaking off in that pool also, so that also needs to be replaced.
And we're not going to shut down both pools at the same time, because I value my life.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no objection, we'll pick that up at the executive session, which takes us to items 10C, Architectural Committee Revised Guidelines and Standards. I think we've just been hit with a big gob of silence here. I guess, is there anyone, I'm not sure what we've got on up for that. Anybody here to discuss it? I'm not sure if what's what. Andy?
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we table it since we received a new version of this just this morning. And I don't know if we've had a chance to actually
now I know what you're
changes.
talking about. I had a lapse. One of those lapses that we have once in a while. Yes, let's table that. Have a motion to table it until our next opportunity. Mr. Giddings, seconded by Herman Hess. All in favor of tabling this until we have a chance to review it? And pass unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on unfinished business, the revised publication policy. I don't recall exactly what that was. My machine shut itself off here. Pardon me? Why don't you go ahead and pick up the mic there?
I can read it. Okay. The Communications Committee today adopted a revised draft of the publications policy that was published in the Oakmont News December 15th and January 1st and is on the board's agenda. The proposal reflects comments from a resident, the publisher, and from committee members. The revised draft is attached. The changes are all in the final section titled Newspaper Size / Material Limit / Responsibilities and are bold-faced in the attached version. They include reducing the maximum story length from 800 words to 500 words. It was felt this is a more practical length and should help reduce the need to cut some stories. Next, reflecting the realities of publishing, where some decisions on story length must be made at the last minute, as all content comes together at the publisher's office, often on deadline. At that point, it is not possible to consult with writers about changes that may be necessary to fit all stories into the available space. Signed, Marty.
Any recommendations, comments on the proposal? Alan, Scott, move that we approve them. We have a second. Seconded by Director Giddings. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That passed unanimously. Okay, we're approaching the end here. As far as future board meetings, anybody have anything they want to see that we haven't added already? I believe, Kathy, there were 2 things that we'd set up for the task. Is that correct?
Right. You have agenda item to approve funds for the Burger Improvement Committee to hire an architect. You have residents caregiver to come back on the agenda. And then from the OCDC and Elnoka, board should write a letter to the city reinforcing OVA's position with the Ridgeline. And OCD encourages an e-blast announcement and perhaps a flyer.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Okay, nothing else. Her motion for adjournment. Moved by Alan Scott, motion to adjourn. Seconded by Mr. Giddings. Do we have any objections? I didn't think so. All right.